Welcome to the Vellore Village Report. I'm your host, Frank Fallico of the Fallico Group. On this edition, we have a special treat. Our team had the pleasure of sitting down with local councillor Rosanna DeFrancesca of Ward 3, which includes Vellore Village, Weston Downs, as well as East Woodbridge. Our team prides itself in being local real estate experts, and the Vellore Village Report helps identify how the fabric of a community is woven together, from residential to business to local government. What better place to start than speaking with a very important pillar of leadership in our community? We understand that sometimes the public can be cynical around politicians, and rightfully so, as their influence on decisions, big or small, can incrementally impact the health of a community. As realtors, we believe the home you pick is important, but the community it sits in will ultimately have the biggest impact on value and your daily life. On each report, we dissect sales numbers, provide actual case studies, look at community events, as well as spotlight local businesses. In addition, it's illuminating to sit down and converse with key individuals who help facilitate progress in our community. What we discovered is that the counselor's sincerity to help people is in line with many of the values that our community looks for. This holds true for current residents as well as future buyers considering to live here. So who is Rosanna DeFrancesca?
Thanks, Frank, first of all, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to get to meet you today and your partners here. But for me, it's been really simple. I've been in the service business all my life. Started at the age of 14. Service was something that was in me from the get-go, and it felt natural to go into political life to serve again on a grander scale. And it just felt natural for me because I love people. I think that it's important to serve people in a manner of which they understand and appreciate and have an impact on their day-to-day life. And I believe in municipal politics, when you're in the grassroots part of it, where you connect, like me and you are connecting today. If I was in Ottawa or the province, I don't know if I could easily connect with you or my neighbors or at the grocery store, so I'm almost like entrenched in my community that I want to serve, happily serve, love my job.
You kind of hit on a few philosophical things that even our team believes, which is, and I think it's a quote from Gandhi, which is, be the change in the world you wish to see. And I believe, if you're working in a community, pretty well what you just said, which is doing the kind of job you do, you can't do it unless you really like people. Because, and I've been to some of the meetings as well, where you see so many different opinions, and trying to make everyone happy is difficult. And our team has often gone through the community itself. As realtors, we do look at why people are moving in and out of a community and what draws them to it, and sometimes what draws them away. And a lot of times those things are vast, wide, and that's really maybe where we start with some of the questions. Is a lot of people will sometimes ask us when we're moving into Vellore Village, what's going on from an infrastructure or development, or if there's anything at all that you could add light to things that you see coming down the pipeline, whether it be in 1 year, 5 year, or 10 year. I think a lot of people are unaware sometimes of those things, and you live and breathe it sometimes every day. So if there's anything that you could share in that regard.
I just want everybody to know that we're constantly working at trying to improve the quality of life in Vaughan. Even though sometimes you're driving through the city and it doesn't quite seem that way, that we're working with our provincial partners and our regional partners all the time to make your life and commuting life a little bit easier. And I know that being a councillor for 12 years, it's always been the same thing about traffic. There are a lot of things, a lot of projects that are coming forward. Our new mayor also has made commitments to new infrastructure projects that are coming down the pipe, promising to bring that funding to current, so that way we can actually get these jobs done. One of them is the Langstaff connection over the CN. Right now we have finished the environmental assessment for the Canada and America Drive bridge that's going to go over the highway just north of Major Mac and Weston Road and connect Jane,
okay.
Right? So that's been long in the making. We're going to go into construction this year, so that should be done within the year. We are also working with our partners to connect, other, more closer to Highway 7 and Weston Road, because that's really the bulk of it. That intersection is probably the most busiest intersection of all of Ontario. And we need to alleviate some commuter traffic. I mean, we have the 407, but it gets expensive for people. We need to create flyovers. There's a Colossus flyover that's, contemplated. We are doing a secondary plan right now for that Weston 7 corridor to identify ways that we can improve the infrastructure to alleviate the congestion that currently exists and also to help with the new growth that's coming.
That's amazing. And you touched on such a wide variety of things there. A lot of people that we've even interviewed in the community are sometimes unaware of how big an area we're talking here, right? So Ward 3, which is what you're responsible, I believe goes from Keston to Steeles, and then as far west as Pine Valley, and then the 400.
That's right.
And when I looked at that map, and obviously living in that community, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of diversity, right? Because you got commercial, industrial, mixed in with older communities, mixed in with new communities. And Vellore Village is kind of at the precipice of being one of the more newer communities. But I think about it often that I don't envy what you have to deal with as far as trying to figure out how all those communities, have to work together. And I can tell you, just from a practical perspective, I've seen a lot of those families move in and out of all those neighborhoods, whether it be East Woodbridge going to Vellore, or somebody, starts off in a townhouse or a condo and then decides, okay, I think I'd like to try and get into Weston Downs, which is a little bit more prominent community, and then figuring out how the traffic works around that. And I will share this with you, and I think we kind of hinted at it. Between traffic was a big one, because when we do our door knocking and canvassing the neighborhood, that was a big one.
Me too.
Right, so and you're driving around, so you get it. We all have a little bit of a pain around that. The second big one that kind of came up often, and just to get your perspective of what you're seeing, is the safety issues that are facing some of these nicer communities, because they do become targeted, because obviously people are going to work, they drive nice cars, they live in great homes, and they get targeted. And any suggestion, anything that you've been seeing, hearing, that might be helpful to share with the community so that they're aware that there is at least some kind of focus on this situation?
There's no doubt that, after COVID, these incidents are a little bit at peak. And Deputy Mayor Linda Jackson, she hosted several safety community meetings with YRP. My regional colleagues did approve also an increase in budget to add more officers to the streets, more investigating officers as well. We now just had an announcement from the province that's going to bring more funding to try to track these guys down, mainly in the auto theft sector, right? I think that because COVID has brought a shortage to vehicles, it's become very lucrative for people to steal vehicles. They're worth more money now, because just the timeline and waiting for a new car when you go order one is a year or 2 years. And so it's become a little bit more profitable for a thief to steal a car now than it was pre-COVID. So the government realizes that, all levels of government, although we don't at the municipal level do anything directly, my regional counterparts do participate. And again, they increased the budget for York Region Police this year, and the Ontario government's doing their part as well. But honestly, Vaughan is one of the safest communities in Ontario. Considering the population, we have one of the lowest crime rates here. And I think that's why people still want to be here. You talked about the different communities within our community, and every sector of my ward is different. And we want to be able to give people different levels of housing so that they can start and end their life in the same community. So someone like my child, or, I'm going to be a grandmother in July, and I want my kids to live here and my grandkids to live here. We want to live together, right? So creating those different levels of housing is important for Vaughan, so that way we can keep our residents here throughout their lifetime, right?
I think you said something very thoughtful, and it kind of struck a chord for me, because that's how I stayed in Vellore. My parents in 1988 bought a home in East Woodbridge, and when I got to a certain age and met a girl and wanted to get married and start a family,
their first desire was to keep us as close as possible. And then, obviously there's a short time after that where you have kids and the grandparents want to be around.
Right.
So sometimes that's lost on people. I want you to know that's not lost on us, and for sure the community probably appreciates that more than they know, even at a subliminal level, which is understanding the fact that as your family grows, you don't want to have them to have to move to Barrie, which is, let's say, a fabulous city, but you don't want your kids an hour away from you because they simply can't afford where they're living. And obviously those constraints that, market starts moving, values start changing, and then trying to make it all work together is really tough to be, let's say, on one person's shoulders, right? And today's talk was really about trying to get the community to understand maybe how they can contribute as well to the process. I know that when we're speaking, a lot of folks out there sometimes don't even understand how much or how less a council power is. Like they might come to you and say, well, you're the council, you should be able to do everything. But obviously there's limitations to what you can and can't do. And I thought it might be good maybe to allow your constituents to understand, okay, what are budget concerns that you might have? What are the constraints that, even though you might have like a laundry list of 100 wish list items, if you wave a magic stick and make it all happen, you could, but you got limits. And maybe share some of that, like what limits you might have as a councillor and what budget concerns you might have in that regard.
First and foremost, the budgets we have are your tax dollars. We constantly need to be cognizant that it's your money. And we can't just spend it willy-nilly. We have to spend it and get good return on that money. So, and it's our responsibility to do so. So we need to get value for that tax dollar for our residents. I know, being a business owner and working from the age of 14, being a mom in a business, raising 3 children, we need government to be accountable to our tax dollar because we work hard for that money. To get an idea of what we do with your money, we collect it. And some of it goes to the region. So it doesn't all come to us. Some goes to the region to provide regional services. And then some goes to the province for education. And then some of it comes to us. And with that money, we administer your parks, your community centers, your roads, your local parks. So those are the types of things we have what you call control over. We can change policy to adapt to wants and needs from the community, but that's where our authority ends. When it comes to other things like policing, you look at the region. When you're looking for other, like healthcare, you're looking at region and the province. So for me, always value for the tax dollar. So we're very careful how we spend our money. We always have reserves. We're in good fiscal position. Vaughan has always been that way. We always put money aside for the unknown. There's always stuff like that going on. But that's pretty much the crux of it. We take every dollar seriously here. So we try to maintain a really lean budget.
You know what, I think, obviously anybody in the community would love to hear that. I know that me on a personal level, again, when we're speaking to folks, the biggest challenge that they have is just that understanding the mechanics of how City Hall may or may not work for them. And, you probably have heard it a million times, oh, you know what, I'm dealing with the city and I kind of get passed around and I don't know, you know what I mean? And that's kind of what we try and do as well as realtors, sometimes to help people know, the mechanics of how your city works and not just being a bystander on the sidelines and being a participant and understanding it. And that might help whoever you voted in understand what needs to be done if your audience understands how to be a good audience. And that's kind of my next question, which is, I almost call it like a Jerry Maguire moment, which is how can we inform, let's say, the community, like help us, help you, help us, meaning, you have a job, you're trying to help them, but is there stuff that the community could do that makes your job more powerful or gives you some leverage when you have to get things done?
I'm always in my community. And I told you that because I feel that you can't feel the pulse of what your community needs or wants being stuck in your Eiffel Tower. So I'm very rarely here except for meetings. I'm in my community, attending the seniors groups, whatever events are out there, or even just putting myself in there to try to communicate with people and on a just on a chat level, say what's up, how's it going, how's the family, what are your challenges. But we have a room called Access Vaughan downstairs. They're operators that deal with any concern you have within the city, whether it's garbage, parks, community center, a program, a seniors program. You go to the community center and the washrooms are not good. You can call Access Vaughan. And if you feel at any point in time, you feel like you're not being addressed properly, then you come to me. Because I need to know that you are having a problem going through the general route. Because then if we need to make changes on a policy that governs our staff, then we need to change things and we need to be aware of it. People say to me all the time, I don't want to call you, it's such a minor thing, but I can't do my job without that. I can't know what the community wants unless you call me, unless you talk to me, unless you approach me. So I want that engagement because it makes me a better representative of the plug.
Again, in full transparency, I'm going to volunteer that your staff didn't know me from Adam. I simply made an email gesture to say, could I possibly meet with the councillor to have an interview about the community? And they went over and above to get me in. And I had no clout. I didn't have a previous relationship with you. Just again, in spirit of transparency, because somebody might be watching this and wondering, well, how did this all happen? And I can say that you're a testament to what you just said. Like your team, your staff was willing to meet with somebody they don't know, didn't know what my position was. They just said, yeah, you have some questions about the community? Great, we will arrange a time. And you can't say that, I don't think, about every councillor everywhere, because again, I've been doing real estate for quite some time and I've gone as far as Mississauga to Aurelia to you name it. So I just wanted to compliment you and your team for that, because I think a lot of people don't know that. And again, I said this before, I don't envy what you have to do. And we're sometimes in that position too, where we're trying to help large groups of people with different opinions and try and corral those opinions to get a positive outcome. So I thank you. I think maybe my last question for the day, and this is only if you have information that you can share with us on it, is the development at Highway 7 in Weston. So even though it's not quite in Vellore, it is in your ward. And a lot of people have been asking us about, hey, is the theater going away? How many buildings are they building? I know a ton of material has already gone out, but we're getting a ton of questions being asked, even just as realtors, like how is that going to affect value? Or, obviously it's going to affect traffic and stuff like that. But anything you can share as far as timeline, what you've been hearing and seeing would be great.
Well, first and foremost, we're going through a process called the secondary plan process.
Okay.
None of these developments can go ahead without the secondary plan being in effect.
Gotcha.
We are still going through that. And what happens with a secondary plan is what we do is we focus in on an area and we basically say, okay, we want to shape and form this area the way the residents, the way staff, and the way the infrastructure will support it. So we bring the landowners together, we bring residents together, and we bring staff together and try to articulate in policy form how we want to and how we envision this area to be. Once that process has been completed, then we will entertain applications. Until then, they can submit because they're allowed to under the Planning Act, but they cannot move forward. We can't advance that application. A lot of these applications will not see the full extent of their applications for 30 years. Right. They will move in phases only because we need to bring that infrastructure in place to deal with it. And the secondary plan will identify exactly what infrastructure will need to be in place to support our vision. So, number one, we need to identify the vision. Number two, we need the money to support that vision, and then the applicants can come forward and do what they have to do. So I don't want to put fear out there because there's nothing to fear right now. But as a resident, as a realtor, anybody in the community, there's going to be some roundtable discussions with residents. They'll be forthcoming. We also have an OP review right now going on, and there'll be more engagement in the community as well for our vision of our city in its entirety. And there'll be a lot of opportunity for residents to participate in that. And I want that engagement. I want it because I need to hear from our community on what they want to see, what they want to keep, what they don't want to see, and how that corridor is going to develop. And that will be the crux of our policy moving forward.
Fair enough. And I think you brought up a lot of fabulous points there. And we often deal with this as realtors as well, which is somebody's submission is not the same as it actually happening.
Correct.
And we've seen, a lot of neighbors sometimes get up in arms around a simple submission. And to the point you made, you can't stop anybody from wanting to submit an idea.
Mm-hmm. We can't. It's
right?
law.
And obviously working for the community, you have to hear out those ideas, and whether they get to the next level, that's a whole, process as you explained. And I think that's probably what happens sometimes is that the fear comes ahead of actually knowing the process. And that's our job as realtors. We sometimes do that, is trying to educate our clients, say, hey, you know what, this is something that might not happen for 20 years, 15 years. If you're planning on being here that long, then yes, you might want to start concerning yourself around it. But, as we say in developments like the weather, you never know exactly what you're going to get because there's a lot of hurdles and everything to that effect. So that was a very good explanation. I think maybe we'll end with this. And if you don't have one, that's great. But I always ask, is there a frustration, like a key frustration that you have as a counselor?
Sometimes I wish I had that magic wand
Yeah.
that I could just wave and fix everything for everyone. That's what but unfortunately, everything's a process. And when you're dealing with public money,
Yes.
there's a process. And you have to be transparent, and you have to go through the rules and regulations to get to where you need to be. And sometimes that's a bit frustrating because it takes time and you want to deliver a little bit more quicker, but these are the guidelines we follow.
I appreciate it. Well, listen, Councillor, you've been incredible today. We look forward to future talks like
Love
this.
it.
I wanted to thank you on behalf of, the Fallico Group real estate team, as well as the Vellore Village Report, which it will be out in. And I thank you, Councillor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
It's a pleasure meeting you.
For meeting you too.
Let's dive into the current numbers for Vellore Village. May 2023 is now only slightly down from May of 2022. It's important to note that by this time last May, we had already seen our third interest rate increase. This dramatically retracted the January 2022 price peak that we all witnessed, and by May, we had settled in. What is encouraging, as we predicted in our last report, is that sales and price would gradually increase. In January of 2023, we sat at a low number of only 18 units sold in Vellore Village. In May, we currently sit at 55 units sold, with still a few days to go. To buyers, we continue to add caution that this gradual increase is likely to continue as we go further into the year, provided, of course, the Bank of Canada leaves the interest rate put. If you're a seller, this could be good news, but we also caution you that July and August are historically the slowest months in the Vellore Village calendar year, as people take vacation. So lawyers, mortgage reps, other support people, taking time off allows buyers to unfortunately push their decisions out when their support people are simply not around. So don't get caught in the mistiming of the market, which brings us right into our most recent case study. We have blocked out the addresses as always to protect the privacy of the sellers. But these semis all reside in Vellore Village, and they are all on the same street, and they're a great example of good and poor strategies. Semi number 1 was originally listed at $1.5 million with a bidding war. It did not sell, so they proceeded to raise the price to $1,585,000, only to sit on the market for another 2 weeks, and they finally sold at $1.4 million. Now, semi number 2, on the other hand, same street, a few houses down, listed with a different strategy. They went much lower with a list price of $1,379,000 and actually sold for higher at $1,469,000. That's almost a whopping $70,000 difference, even though from the pictures, they're very comparable, and in some cases, I would argue to say the semi that sold for less was actually slightly superior. So what happened here? Well, for starters, we often say that starting off high with your price seldom gets you more. In fact, what it does do is deter would-be buyers from bidding, as the seller appears unrealistic. Now, was this a combination of the seller not respecting the market or simply getting poor advice? We will never know. But this is a great illustration how poor strategy on a similar house can go drastically different. Another important consideration is that semi number 1 sold in April, while semi number 2 sold in May. And while it's only a month difference, as you can see from the recent sales numbers, the momentum of price going up, as we predicted, would and did make a difference. In short, if semi number 1 had priced correctly and waited 30 days, they would have likely earned an extra $70,000. My wise grandmother always used to say, a wise person learns from their mistakes, an even wiser person learns from the mistakes of others. And we hope this helps you. Get ready for the ultimate movie night experience. City Councillor Rosanna DeFrancesca is back with the 10th annual movie night in the park. Join your community on June 16th at 7:30 p.m. at the Vellore Village Community Center for a night full of free entertainment and refreshments under the stars. Bring your blankets, snacks, and loved ones, and let's enjoy a movie night together. This is one event you do not want to miss. See you there.